Imagine building your entire livelihood around a single crop, the one that feeds your family and fuels your community's economy, only to see that crop suddenly shut out of its biggest market. That's exactly what happened to Canadian canola farmers in August 2025. China slapped a steep 75.8% tariff on Canadian canola seed, instantly cutting off a $5 billion trade stream. In the heart of the prairies, fields of golden yellow canola had symbolized stability for generations. Now, trucks sat idle, silos were full, and farmers were staring at a future filled with uncertainty. This wasn't just about economics. It was a shockwave through towns built on agriculture. Canola is more than a crop. It's family income, the lifeblood of rural economies, and one of Canada's top exports. Overnight, farmers were left asking, how do you survive when your biggest customer disappears? And this wasn't only a Canadian issue, it set the stage for a tense standoff between Canada and one of the world's most powerful economies. In Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, families don't just grow canola, they live by it. When China closed its doors, farmers faced immediate strain-missed loan payments, delayed equipment upgrades, and uncertainty about next season's planting. It's easy to view trade disputes as numbers on a spreadsheet. But in these communities, the consequences were deeply personal. Families who'd counted on stability for decades suddenly found it gone. Local suppliers, trucking companies, and co-ops felt the squeeze too, setting off ripple effects across small-town economies. Even short delays in sales meant late wages, feed shortages for livestock, and anxiety that hung over entire communities. Canola isn't just a commodity here, it's woven into the cultural and economic fabric of the prairies. When a market as big as China disappears overnight, it shakes not only bank accounts, but the very sense of security families depend on. These tariffs weren't just about agriculture, they were a move in a larger geopolitical chess game. Beijing's goal was clear apply economic pressure to push Canada on United States electric vehicle tariffs. By targeting canola, China hoped to use one of Canada's most important exports as leverage. But the gamble was risky. Trade leverage only works if the other side has no alternatives. Canada, however, had long built global trade networks. The question quickly emerged. Would this pressure force Canada to back down or push it to diversify and strengthen elsewhere? In today's world, trade disputes go beyond dollars. They carry political weight. Farmers and communities feel the shock immediately, while governments maneuver behind the scenes. It's a chessboard where every move triggers reactions across continents. For Canada, the challenge was protecting farmers, keeping exports moving, and showing resilience in the face of pressure. Ottawa didn't sit on its hands. Within weeks, the federal government announced a $370 million support package, unveiled by Prime Minister Mark Carney. The plan included incentives to convert canola into biofuels, more funding to market Canadian seed abroad, and higher loan limits for producers struggling with cash flow. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe echoed the message, emphasizing stability for prairie families and pushing for expanded renewable diesel blending. These weren't just short-term band-aids. They aimed to create new domestic uses for canola, cutting reliance on China. By moving quickly, Canada sent a clear signal. It would not be a passive victim of trade coercion. Instead, it would adapt, protect livelihoods, and turn the crisis into an opportunity to reshape its economic strategy. With China off the table, Canada immediately turned to other buyers. Exports surged to Japan, the European Union, Mexico, and the United Arab Emirates. Between January and July alone, Japan imported nearly 1 million tons of Canadian canola seed. The European Union took about 800,000 tons. Mexico bought almost 500,000 tons. The United Arab Emirates absorbed over 260,000 tons. Meanwhile, the United States remained a reliable partner, buying more than 1 million tons of canola oil and nearly 2 million tons of meal. The message was clear. While losing China definitely hurt, Canada still had strong global demand. By diversifying exports, farmers spread risk, just like an investment portfolio, so no single market could cripple them again. It also sent a political signal to Beijing. By showing that alternative markets could absorb huge volumes, Canada weakened the effectiveness of China's tariffs as a pressure tactic. At the same time, it strengthened trade ties with other nations, laying a foundation for more balanced global partnerships. For China, replacing Canadian canola wasn't easy. Australia seemed like a natural substitute, but most of its 5 million tons were already locked into contracts with Europe. India supplied rapeseed meal, but the volume and nutritional quality just didn't match. Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan chipped in, but quality inconsistencies and transport risks limited their role. That left China leaning more heavily on soybeans and palm oil, both more expensive and less efficient substitutes. Unlike Canadian canola, which offered a unique mix of oil and protein, these alternatives couldn't fully meet the needs of livestock, aquaculture, and food producers. The reality was clear. While China could diversify, it came with higher costs and logistical headaches. The move revealed the limits of trade pressure and hinted that maximum economic coercion might actually backfire. By September 2025, there were already signs Beijing might return to the negotiating table. The Ministry of Commerce extended its anti-dumping probe into Canadian canola by 6 months, moving the deadline to March 9, 2026. For Beijing, this bought more time to explore alternatives, but it also quietly signaled that the door to dialogue wasn't shut. It was a subtle acknowledgement that cutting off Canada entirely carried real costs. For Ottawa, the delay was breathing room. During this window, Canada doubled down on strengthening domestic markets, expanding biofuel programs, and redirecting exports. It wasn't just waiting for China's next move, it was building alternatives that reduced vulnerability and proved that strategy matters more than reaction. This moment revealed a bigger truth about global trade. Leverage is never absolute. Even a heavyweight like China must weigh the ripple effects of its decisions. Cutting Canadian canola drove up feed costs, disrupted supply chains, and left gaps that substitutes couldn't fully fill. By standing firm while keeping channels open, Canada showed that endurance and careful planning often outweigh knee-jerk retaliation. As Canada wrestled with China, a fresh challenge appeared much closer to home: the United States. In 2025, President Donald Trump expanded tariffs on steel, aluminum, autos, and other core sectors, jolting supply chains across North America. For Canadian exporters, the stakes were massive. Costs climbed, supply chains wavered, and uncertainty spread to workers, businesses, and communities already under strain. Small businesses felt it almost instantly. In Ontario, companies dependent on U.S. imports struggled to keep operations afloat, while workers feared layoffs. To soften the blow, Ontario's government launched the Protecting Ontario Fund, a $1 billion emergency loan program aimed at industries hit hardest by tariffs. Loans ranging from $250,000 to $40 million helped stabilize payrolls, facilities, and essential production. This was a clear reminder. Trade disputes don't just live on government balance sheets. They ripple out into everyday life. With simultaneous pressure from China and the U.S., Canada faced a complex, high-stakes environment that tested its ability to adapt and protect its people. Rather than retaliate, Canada built resilience. The government rolled out a multi-layered defense plan to safeguard its economy, domestic procurement mandates to strengthen internal demand, a $5 billion strategic fund to support industries under pressure, reskilling programs to help displaced workers transition, and incentives to expand biofuel production using canola. Even the federal EV mandate was temporarily paused, giving automakers room to adjust amid rising costs. This wasn't reactionary, it was a calculated shield. By reinforcing demand at home, investing in industries, and preparing workers, Canada reduced its exposure to external shocks. It also sent a political signal. Canada wouldn't be coerced. It wasn't stumbling through crisis. It was charting a deliberate course, balancing stability at home with leverage abroad. This strategy soon showed real results. Farmers redirected canola to new buyers or converted it into biofuels, keeping production alive. In manufacturing, support programs helped steel, aluminum, and auto supply chains stay afloat despite United States tariffs. Provinces adapted too. Quebec leaned on its abundant hydropower to keep aluminum competitive, while Ontario's auto sector relied on targeted aid to maintain production. Workers benefited as well. 50,000 Canadians took part in training programs that kept layoffs from snowballing. By focusing on people as much as products, Canada prevented economic shocks from turning directly into lost livelihoods. The approach stabilized not only industries, but also the communities built around them. While Canada built resilience, American businesses and families began to feel the sting of tariffs. Small retailers were hit hardest. Take Westside Kids, a family-owned toy store that had survived for 40 years, until tariffs on Chinese imports forced it to close its doors. Across the United States, rising import prices drove up costs for everyday goods. According to Yale's Budget Lab, tariffs in 2025 added $2,200 to $3,800 per year to household expenses. Lower-income families felt it most, as essentials like food, clothes, and electronics became harder to afford. Meanwhile, United States manufacturers faced rising costs in steel, aluminum, and auto parts, undermining competitiveness at home. The fallout revealed a key lesson. Coercive trade tactics have limits. Tariffs meant to pressure Canada also created pain within America's own borders. Canada's shield stood in sharp contrast, showing that diversification, targeted relief, and resilience can blunt the impact of global shocks far better than reactionary tariffs. The canola dispute and broader tariff battles underline a fundamental reality. Leverage is never absolute. Even the largest economies are constrained by the web of global supply chains. Canada's experience proves that resilience beats retaliation. By diversifying markets, investing in industries, and protecting workers, it showed how endurance outlasts short-term economic force. Another lesson: long-term planning matters. Canada paired emergency relief, like biofuel incentives and loan programs, with forward-looking policies that strengthened industries and workforce skills. This dual approach allowed the country to manage the immediate crisis while preparing for future shocks. And finally, the crisis reinforced how deeply interconnected the global economy has become. Trade isn't zero-sum. Pressure applied to one side often boomerangs back, creating costs for the initiator. Canada's battles over canola, metals, and tariffs are more than stories of economics. They're lessons in resilience. By supporting farmers, stabilizing industries, and diversifying trade, Canada built a shield that turned external pressure into strength. The events of 2025 show that leverage can shake markets, but it doesn't guarantee compliance. Even superpowers face limits when alternatives are costly and supply chains are interconnected. Canada's proactive, calculated approach demonstrates that when policies focus on people, industry, and diplomacy, pressure can be transformed into opportunity. Now the question is, who wins the trade chess match? Canada has proven that resilience matters, but global trade is fluid, and the next moves will shape economies for years to come. What do you think? Will Canada's strategy hold, or will tariffs continue to reshape North American trade? Share your thoughts in the comments below.